Hey up everyone, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all well and you're looking after yourselves and you're staying inside. Today's video is going to be part 4 of my NRL rivalry video series where I go in depth with some of the rivalries that are in the National Rugby League. So tonight's rivalry is St George versus Cronulla. So just a bit of background on this rivalry. St George were founded in 1921, as you all know, and then they formed a joint venture with Illawarra at the end of 1998 to become St George Illawarra. They've won 15 premierships as St George and won as St George Illawarra as a joint venture. And Cronulla were founded in 1967, so they're the little brother of this rivalry that you can see. And they've won the one premiership in 2016, so it took them nearly 50 years to win the premiership. So St George were around a lot longer than Cronulla and had already established themselves, were very, very successful. The second most successful side in the competition's history. So when Cronulla came into the competition in 1967, it was definitely little brother versus big brother. So tonight I'm just going to go through the head-to-head between the two rivals. I'm going to go through the first meeting, the first time that they ever had a finals match against each other. And I'm going to be documenting all the big moments of the rivalry as well. So, head to head, there's been 121 matches played between St George and Cronulla since 1967. There's been 53 wins to Cronulla, 62 wins to St George, and 6 draws. The first meeting between the two clubs was a pre-season cup match between St George and Cronulla on the 10th of March 1967, and it finished 20 points to 10 to St George. Their first official meeting in the competition didn't happen until May the 21st of the same year, where St George defeated Cronulla 20 points to 7. Cronulla's first win against St George didn't happen until 1971. So for the first 3 or 4 years, St George dominated the rivalry. Cronulla beat St George 19 points to 15 at Congaree Oval, so that was their first win over their rivals. The first time they ever played each other in a finals match was in 1973 when Cronulla beat St George 18 points to 0 at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Of course, Cronulla went on to win to make the grand final that year, but they lost against Manly 10 points to 7, as I discussed last night, in what has been described as one of the most brutal and bloody grand finals of all time. Now, believe it or not, between 1973 and 1999, the two clubs didn't meet each other in a finals match. They had lots of big rivalry games in between there and a few player swaps, but they actually didn't meet each other in a finals match. So we go all the way forward to 1999. Cronulla finishes minor premiers. They were tipped to win the competition alongside Parramatta. In this preliminary final, they come up against St George. They took an 8-0 lead at half time, but then St George come back in the second half, inspired by Blacklock, Mundine and a couple of the other players, and they won that match 24 points to 8 to break Cronulla hearts. So for all you Cronulla fans out there, it must hate to remember that moment, remember that game, but it's an important match in the rivalry and it makes it what it is today. Then we go forward to 2002. Cronulla play against St George in another finals match, and Cronulla get their revenge, and they do it in style. They beat St George 40 points to 24 at the Sydney Football Stadium. So they knocked St George out of the competition that year and advanced to the preliminary finals. And in 2005, the two clubs met each other in the finals again. This time St George were the minor premiers. Cronulla made the finals but weren't expected to go too far, and St George won that match 28 points to 22, so there was a bit of a scare there. Cronulla almost pulled off the upset, but St George managed to prevail and they booked their place in the preliminary final. Well, that's the last actual finals game I have for you between the two clubs. They haven't played each other in a finals match since. But one thing about the rivalry that makes it especially fierce, if you're not from Sydney and you don't know the areas, St George and the Cronulla districts touch each other. So it's similar to Eastern Suburbs, South and Parramatta and Canterbury, where you get The two clubs, their geographical location, they touch each other. And before Cronulla come into the competition, St George, their district and their juniors used to extend to the Cronulla region. So you had players like Norm Proven, he played for a club in Sutherland called the Sutherland Gravediggers. But just imagine if he was born about 20 or 30 years later, he would have been a Cronulla junior. Also, you have a lot of player swapping between the two clubs. So I'll go through a couple of players that have either swapped clubs or played for both clubs. So you've got Jack Baird, you've got Tyson Frizzell, Matt Pryor, Lance Thompson, who was a St George legend, went over to Cronulla. You've got Josh Dugan, Sam Munge, Jeremy Smith, Jared Beale, Jason Stevens, another St George legend, Monty Porter. He won plenty of premierships in the 60s. He went to to Cronulla. And Steve Rogers, one of Cronulla's greatest ever players, he went to St George as well. And then the coaches. Cronulla's inaugural head coach was St George legend Ken Kearney. There was also Johnny Reaper coach Cronulla in the 1970s, and also Norm Proven, another St George legend. He was head coach of Cronulla in the late 1970s, and he took him to that grand final against Manly. And just recently, going back in the opposite direction, you've got Shane Flanagan, Cronulla coach and legend, took him to that maiden premiership victory in 2016. He's now on the board at St George, and who knows, he might be the head coach one day. So it's a very interesting rivalry. Both clubs hate each other very much, but there's also a lot of player swapping, and you've got that very close geographical location as well. And also, I might add, Cronulla's playing Cogra Oval for the next 2 years. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Cronulla and their supporters go about playing at Cogra. If you've watched the player interview with Entertain House, he interviews Jacob Host, and when asked who his biggest rival is, in his opinion, he comes back and says definitely Cronulla. And when Entertain House asked him how does he feel about Cronulla playing at Cogra Oval, he kind of had the look of someone that's just sucked a lemon or swallowed something very sour. He wasn't very happy, I think, with Cronulla using their home ground. So that's a brief and in-depth overlook of the Cronulla versus St George rivalry. I've just crammed about 50 years worth of history into about 8 minutes there. I thought I did quite well. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, please give it a like. If you really liked it, please share it. Share it with your friends and family who may be Cronulla or St George fans. Did I get it right? Is there anything I missed out? If I did, let me know in the comment section below. And also, if you have a spare moment, go over to Rugby League History. That's my Facebook page. I put a link in the description below, and I've just started an Instagram page as well, which is linked to Rugby League History. So go check those out. I put a link in the description below. But as always, I'll catch you all later. Take care of yourselves and ta-ra.